All right, and we're going. Share my screen. All right. I better not do that. Okay. So, yep, Sabbatical 2019. The college was really nice in letting me do this all within the year 2019. You know, the way that it works academic year wise is our next academic year starts July 1st officially and goes until the end of June. And they worked with me because we thought it would be the most advantageous for students to have one part-time instructor throughout that growing season rather than in parts of 2 different seasons. So they allowed me to straddle 2 academic years to do this in the interest of making things more understandable with a greater level of continuity for everybody. All right, so yeah, here was the project I proposed and was approved for, was to live and work with profitable small farmers, learn from them, gain skills specifically in livestock production and also in floral production, get new knowledge, new skills, new information, develop skills that I already have in those areas through visiting these farms, working with them, living with them, researching what they do, cataloging, the practices that they're using, making videos, taking pictures, bringing back all sorts of, you know, documentation that could be used in classes that can remind me of things that I can then put in to other content. And a big part of it too was looking at different marketing strategies. This one was a joy for me and very interesting to see how people in other countries, I went to Western Europe for part of this, tackle the subject of selling your farm products. Now, a caveat, or, you know, it's worth mentioning now that this was all before the coronavirus situation. So what looks like marketing now might be significantly different for these growers than what they were doing before. Around here, with most of my farm contacts and community, it seems like the demand is high. People are just figuring out how they can get the food out to people as fast as possible and considering growing more than they had planned for this year because there is such a strong demand. And then, of course, the last aspect of the project is to share this thing with students through making a new course, through giving presentations like this, through talking to people individually, and through putting new information, new and better information into the classes that already exist where it's relevant and pertinent. So this guy on the right is a Highland beef cattle from Austria. These guys were spoiled brats. They got fresh grass cut for them every morning and they were loving it, living a very nice, comfortable existence out there in the mountains. Hey, Cynthia, thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
All right, so on a professional level, you know, I was asked to meet certain requirements to have this be worthwhile for the college and bring something useful back. So I was looking to catalog that for people here, and a big part of it was new content into existing courses. Hi, Sue, thanks for being here. So I'm trying to give a picture of what sort of things I picked up and where specifically they're going. So as I mentioned, the marketing aspect, you know, new techniques, alternative income streams, ways to develop group marketing, whether that's kind of like a food hub idea that we're somewhat familiar with here, or just with a few other farms. And so that's, that information is going to be showing up and is showing up this term in the sequence of organic farming practicum classes. That's 113, 141. And then it'll also be in a couple other classes there through food harvest and fruit and berry and local and federal regulation compliance. I learned a lot about this regarding livestock through working on a couple diversified livestock farms in the US as well as at a slaughter and meat processing facility. So I worked side by side with state meat inspectors and had a lot of conversation about what's allowed and what's not, and how do you look for disease on these animals, and what are the standards for bringing them in during processing, post-processing. And that's all important regulatory information, although maybe a little bit boring, but that's the ticket into the markets to sell this and make some money. Another thing was creative land tenure. Right? These days, one of the huge issues for aspiring growers, farmers, is how can I afford to do this? Where am I going to get land? If I can't buy acreage because it costs $1 million. And I saw some really creative ways to go about this through rental lands, through working again with other growers to do so. And that stuff likewise is showing up in the organic farming practicum sequence, and especially for winter when we talk about developing a business and putting your plan into action. So another piece, and this refers specifically to the floral production, but could certainly work for any kind of on-farm dinner or something like that. But this was event planning and bidding for specific large events. In this case, it was mostly weddings that we were doing flowers for, but how to bid that process, how to communicate specifically with mothers of the bride and brides in a situation where they want everything to be a very specific way, and it's very important how it appears at a specific time on the wedding day. So working with them really particularly and giving them a clear idea of what they're going to be seeing, what they're going to be expecting, and having a set of plan B, C, Ds in place should that day be rainy or that flower not open soon enough, or whatever the potential hurdle. In general, just annual perennial cut flower production, that's going into those courses as well, and definitely into the summer on-campus farm experience as we start raising more and more. We've been doing some annual cut flower production and looking to expand into perennials with our new ground next to the veg house that is currently being tarped to kill off some Canada thistle, and then next season we'll go into production. And then operation and maintenance of more hand tools and more machinery. This is stuff mainly for livestock that I hadn't worked with before, just specific tractor pulled implements and PTO powered things that were new to me. And lots of these farmers were glad of the free help and happy to lay underneath the tractor and show me how to work on it, or show me how to hitch this thing up and let me drive it around and try to help them out. All right. So the first concrete example with some pictures that I want to mention is the marketing, because in this whole process there's developing the skills to be a farmer, and there's developing the skills to be a business owner. And one of those is the ability to market your product, which keeps all of that production skill needed so that you can continue to run your business. And I saw, just some small growers doing a really excellent job of this. And this is in particular why we targeted working with some of these places. So this one here, both are from the same farm. This is called Jacob's Ladder. They're south of London in the UK. And it's just a couple with no additional labor help running a 100-acre beef and sheep operation. So they're raising cattle and sheep for meat. And they're doing as much as they can to make that a value-added product. And on the left here, they've partnered with a kind of a local organic type grocery store to be their primary beef and lamb provider. And Jane, the woman of the couple who's here to my right in the photo, it also became a butcher, learned butchery so that they could not only process down post-slaughter, butcher their own animals down into cuts But also she does the butchery of whole animals that that grocery store gets in as a side job, you know, a little bit of a more dependable market stream, money stream if the marketing of the beef is going down. Their big thing that they did was create this processed product of hamburger. So grinding up the beef, right? They had various recipes for the spice mix. They had rented a space where she both did the butchery and the meat processing. And then they would turn around and prepare and sell these burgers at festivals and events throughout the south of England. And, you know, it's considerably smaller, so the places you can get to in an hour or two involve, you know, 40 million people or something like that. So there's quite a few events going on, and lots of opportunities for things like this in a densely populated place where people really like to get outside and do something. So you can see on the menu there, they've got a hamburger, a cheeseburger. We were out of the bacon that day, and it turned what is, as a raw product, you know, somewhat profitable into something where they were making, you know, 8 to 10 times that income off the burger business than they were off just selling wholesale beef to grocery stores or to, you know, CSA customers or people who want half a cow or something like that. So by adding some value and doing a little bit more work and taking that product directly into a retail environment with customers, they were very successful. And it was really that burger business that made it the difference between a profitable farm and one that's breaking even. Cool. Continuing with marketing. This is something that I spend a lot of time talking about with students in class, and having more examples and better examples, ideas of what they might do and how they might do it is really important to me and hopefully very useful for them. These two photos both come from a sort of cooperative store in the Savoie region in France. I worked at a goat milking dairy, goat cheese farm there, and the goat farmers were one of 10 farm owners of this business. And it's a, you know, it's like a fresh green market sort of. They got produce and fruit and cheese and meat and bread and all the things that could be produced locally and sold by local growers in, you know, a kind of a rustic-y grocery store environment. And so they had 10 farms who owned this thing and obviously sell their own product into it. They also bought from about 20 other member farms, and they have a whole business structure of monthly meetings. They have a work schedule based upon your the gross revenue your farm is making off selling product through the store. Has a relationship to the number of hours that your business needs to work there each month. And then in addition, they hire some part-time employees to, you know, work the cheese counter and be the checker. Otherwise, it's, you know, 75% run by the member owners. And in terms of a wholesale environment, which would be, you know, a grocery store like this or selling to a restaurant, the average farm is selling their farm product to that wholesaler for about half of what their retail price would be. And here, because they're keeping it all local and they are the member owners of the business, they're able to get about 85% of that retail dollar by selling through the store. And then the other 10%, 10% goes into maintaining the store as a business, you know, paying taxes, etc. 5% into fees and things like that. So they're able to get a better income off that same product for themselves through direct local marketing in the store. It's obviously also a place where they can all put up flyers about their farms and their CSA programs and their on-farm events, and they're all located, you know, within about 20 miles of the store. So the community knows who they are, they can reach those farms easily, and there's really a connection there. Part of it is cultural, in that people are accustomed to shopping in this sort of way, and part of it is that they're working in a really creative way to make something that's accessible to everybody and that serves their business needs better. So I hope that this sort of model is something that we can see more of here in the future, where farmers are working together to achieve this sort of end that really benefits everyone along that supply chain from producer to retail sell. In my next set here regarding marketing on the left, I'm still working with the French goat cheese farm here, and this is our delivery day for what they call a MAP, which is basically the French equivalent of a CSA, so a weekly subscription to some sort of box of food. And in this case, it's a group thing. So for example, we delivered cheese. This is a Tuesday evening at like the town center in this little village. We delivered cheese. You know, a produce farm delivered produce, the orchard delivered apples, the baker delivered bread, et cetera, et cetera. So you could get like a full market basket of your groceries that night in your pickup, and at the same time support a variety of businesses. And I think that's especially useful because it's a way to kind of share the wealth, if you will. Here now it's more common to see a CSA that has, you know, add an egg share, add a meat share, add a, you know, and obviously if they don't produce it, they're buying it from somebody, but then that's going through the whole chain. Whereas here again, it's a direct relationship with the retail customer, which gets you more money and, you know, really ingratiates you, makes it clear the value you have to the community. And so we had drop-off sites mostly at community buildings like this and churches. Most had some sort of room that was cool, or a refrigerator where we could put the cheese until the delivery moment happened. And people were very excited. You know, it's like a farmer's market scene. People come in with strollers and kids and walking around, grabbing their stuff and chatting and creating a community event basically surrounding this pickup. So there's always a cascade of value outside of just selling food for money that comes with something like this. And I think that that kind of exposing people to the relationship between who's producing their food and the fact that they're using it for sustenance, you know, and enjoying it is really important right now in the face of more and more uncertainty and more separation from, you know, the things that happen in our old daily lives. On the right here is at the time yet to be opened addition to an Austrian farm that we worked on that produced dairy products. They made cheese and butter and other fermented milk products. And this is the on-site store which he was opening up because of regulations regarding the sale of unpasteurized dairy. So just like in the US, where there's all these weird rules state to state about you can sell it, but you can't advertise it, or you can't sell it here, but you can sell it there, or you can sell goat milk, but not cow's milk unpasteurized. You know, this guy is a 55-year-old multi-generational Austrian dairy farmer, is looking to navigate that same kind of regulatory set of hoops by selling on site, which is allowed. And so he basically created through local marketing a pardon me, I'm gonna mute here. And an email list of interested customers who live close enough that they could come and pick up orders at the store. And so inside here, he had a series of fridges and a series of shelves for product that didn't have to be refrigerated, and organized it like a little shop. Or if you had a specific individual order, right, we boxed it up, labeled it, and put it there waiting for you to be picked up. The key to this thing is that, not the literal key, but just to the left of the doorknob there is a digital lock pad. And so customers get the combination sent to them, which allows them to enter on their own at any time of day or night to grab their product when it's convenient for them, without having to wake up the farmer and run outside. All the purchase is done via credit card online ahead of time. And so it doesn't cost him any extra labor during the day, and he can increase his sales that way. And it allows people from the community to know directly where their food is. We didn't get to see it in action long, because he was literally just, we helped completing the inside of that building and beginning to pack for that. But it seems like an excellent idea, and certainly in the face of those regulations, one of the few options he had for continuing to market on a local basis without having to go for pasteurization of all of his products, which was a personal value he had and did not want to take part in.
Seems brilliant. Can I chime in there for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Those apple crates there, are those individually labeled, or does everyone just get the same basic package?
They're individually labeled by family name on the front.
Oh, I see.
Where's my annotate?
I can kind of maybe see one.
So this one here, there's a name tag on the front. They all have that same sort of thing stapled on there. And then that allows each family to kind of tailor it to what they want. So regarding the cheese, you could choose a weekly or bi-weekly delivery of €8, €10, or €12 worth of cheese. So, you know, if you just want a little or you want more, and the same thing for the produce and the fruit and the bread, you know, you can get 2 loaves, you can get 1 loaf, or you can get, you know, vegetables for 4 people or vegetables for 2 people. And that was each individual farm that was contracted with. So it's less record keeping for any one farm to handle all of those requests. You just handle what your customer wants from your specific product and drop it off.
Seems brilliant. Like a food mailbox, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just have to remember to go to the mailbox.
Exactly. I've been seeing more of this pop up now, which is super pertinent now, where there's just the no contact, where you can enter and exit, you know, kind of stations, basically. And I think that's whatever. We'll probably see more of that. More of that will probably stick as well post-COVID.
Definitely. So yeah, you know, before it was maybe about food safety regulations. Now it's about human you know, safety regulations. In any case, I think you're absolutely right that we can expect to see more of it, and coming up with these kind of methods that allow people to get the specialty or local product that they're looking for, while at the same time being safe and feeling safe about it is really important. Thanks, TJ. All right, so that's my last marketing slide. Where am I?
Chris, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Hey, so those wooden crates, they are obviously, at least to a certain point, stackable if they're all intact. But did the people take those home and bring them back, or did they bring their own shopping bags and leave the crates behind?
They brought their own shopping bags and left the crates behind. It was just kind of a placeholder so people knew, you know, which one was theirs.
Right.
But yeah, most people brought their own bags, or they pulled up a car and, you know, just like put it right in the trunk. Or, you know, they brought a stroller without a kid in it and packed up the stroller and walked it home.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to floral production for markets and events, you know, this is one that seems to be a growing market here in the Northwest and across the country for the most part. It's a way that vegetable farms can add a little bit, or farms that want to concentrate specifically on floral production can do a high value thing. This season is really tough given the situation. You know, weddings are being canceled or postponed, and other events that might require, you know, a large purchase of live flowers. This one here in the photo, we did flowers for a very large Hindu wedding, and it was very interesting. This whole setup is called the mandap, and it's kind of like the stage for the main event part of the wedding. There's a bunch of offerings there, and we created that stage and curtains and the flower top part as part of it, along with table decorations, bouquets for the bride and bridesmaids and all of that. And so I really learned a lot about communicating, in particular with customers for large event situations. The mother of the bride in this case was extremely particular, you know, trying to pull off a legitimate Hindu Indian wedding in upstate New York.
Hey,
And
Trey, it's Amy Rose.
yeah.
I have a floral design, and that was one of the areas I hated with weddings, because they're so particular. So you would say that even in that kind of a different culture, it was the same kind of thing, perfection.
Definitely, you know, it's a big event, and what we experienced was more than about the bride wanting it to be her special day and look good, was the bride's mother wanting it to be a good reflection on her ability to plan and throw a party in front of, you know, her friends and family.
Wow.
And so, you know, we tried to talk to her in that context about, well, you know, what we can and can't do on incredibly short notice. For example, she called the night before the wedding and tried to make significant changes, you know, at which point we had already harvested flowers, we had already made arrangements, and, you know, some things couldn't be undone. So it was a bit of a challenge to work with her at that time. You know, she's like, it's a very important life marker for her daughter, and it taught me a lot about meeting someone where they're at in this sort of context and trying to understand their viewpoint at the same time as being upfront and honest about what you can really accomplish as a business. That's definitely one thing I got out of that experience, is that if you overpromise and underdeliver, that does not look good. So if you can be at least upfront about what you can deliver and then deliver on it, right, at the very least, someone will think you are honest. And so that's that's a good place to be. All right, let me see if I can move forward here. So here you can see we were getting ready for that wedding, making, on the right here is what the groom would be wearing around his neck during the ceremony. On the left was our setup for arrangement making. And this was a cool example. Barbara here on the right was our floral design and production mentor. She's been a flower grower for 40 years, and she works about a 3-acre annual and perennial flower garden that almost all of her sales come from. And then she also buys in things for when customers have specific requests. You know, if they want some sort of tropical flower or something, obviously, that doesn't grow in New York State, then they buy in from mostly Dutch suppliers. Another marketing example is that she spread out into other floral related products. These are natural ink silk dyed scarves. And so she made these prints, she rolled them up. It's sort of like tie-dye, and you know, has these floral prints, and these sold very well at market. She was selling these scarves and also ties on the right for $50 a piece, which is, you know, for the couple hours of work that go into it, it's a good price. And it's a way to set herself apart at the Troy Community Farmers Market where we're working. She was not the only flower vendor, but definitely the only one who had anything besides just flowers. So the kind of dried arrangements that she had, these craft projects made her the go-to if you wanted anything floral related that wasn't just, you know, 5 or 6 stems wrapped up together. So really a way to identify herself in particular as a business in the face of a very busy kind of PSU downtown sort of market scene. Okay, so my third point there was learning new tools and machinery and being able to share that with students when I came back. These are some examples of what I saw. These are 2 different Austrian farms. On the left, it was a 600-acre dairy farm. On the right, it was a 250-acre beef farm with that cow from the very first slide. So on the left, I learned about using this series of pumps. They had 3 tractors running here. One tractor was stirring up the manure slurry in a giant subterranean concrete tank that was under the barn. So in the winter time, as the cows are eating and pooping in there, this huge cistern is just filling up. And then come summertime, this was July last year, then one tractor just had like what looks like a longboat propeller on it, stirring the slurry. Another tractor hooked up to the PTO was all of that blue metal there, which is a big pump, pumping that slurry up out of the cistern to the third tractor, which was running 1,000 feet of hose. And in that one, the farmer was driving around spraying that slurry out on his fields through the hosing as I was back there maintaining the pump and making sure that the hose didn't clog as things were continuing to go there. So that's it's a lot of technology in one way, but it's all technology that was available in the 40s basically. And it's also a great way to, you know, obviously make use of the fertility that you're generating as a dairy farm to feed the grass that you're going to in turn feed those same cows the next winter. So it's really a great example of closed loop. Frank, is that a question?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of things on my screen. It's hard to keep up.
Does that slurry, does that create a heat source as well over the winter? Or is it too deep in? I've heard of some compost heat generation, you know, kind of dual systems. I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't think it's intended as such, but
Okay.
Obviously, you know, that bunch of like viscous liquid is holding on to a bunch of heat. But the cows themselves in the barn are generating more heat, I think, than just the slurry underground, because it's a thick concrete walled cistern that, you know, sort of like a basement, is probably keeping the temperature pretty neutral.
Probably trying to capture some of the and vent it somewhere else as well, I would imagine.
Definitely outside the barn. Yeah, over here where this outdoor access point was. On the right, and Frank, you can correct my pronunciation here, is the Ladenwagen. And this is a great little machine. It's PTO powered behind a tractor. It basically has a bandsaw blade in there, and you drive it over your hayfield, and it cuts fresh grass, and it goes through that after it's cut, and it falls back, and it just keeps getting pushed further back within the cage. And you can see it's got a bunch of kind of a web of strings around it to hold the grass in. So you go till that thing's filled up, and then we backed it up to the barn here, dump it out, and that's how they get their green chop fresh grass for the beef cattle each morning, which, you know, when it's just cut like that, their nutrition's really high. They're very into eating it, and so you can get faster growth of the animal. You get a healthier animal because you're getting the most nutrition when you have hay, which they also did feed throughout the winter. You're just not getting the same level of vitamins and minerals, even though the protein content is higher because it's fermented. So this was their way of creating a healthy herd and setting themselves up for what was an operation that was run by basically the wife of the couple, and the husband would do this before work. Then he had a full-time off-farm job, and he would come home and do some more of the machinery work if needed, cutting hay. But the basic work during the day, feeding the cattle, working with them, moving them in pastures, fixing the fences, doing the marketing, was all done by the wife, and allowed them to have this, large acreage, large home, again, multi-generational, been in the family for 300 years, through, off-farm employment combined with maintaining the family farm.
Is there a simple way of explaining why you would bring the hay to the cattle and not put the cattle out where the hay grows?
There is, and the simple explanation is for the management of the compaction of running them all out there, and the rotational plan for cutting hay that year. They had a very detailed plan broken down into 10-acre sections of how they handled their rotation, both for hay production and for grazing. And they use this technique so that they can basically maximize, they're simultaneously grazing on some pastures, growing some for hay, cutting some of those for fresh green chop, and then have a short turnaround time before they can cut that for hay again without coming in, having all the animals trample on it. And so that was their explanation for why they did it like that.
I'd heard that before, that like really a lot of these bigger systems with livestock, you're just a grass farmer, and everything else is how you bounce that around getting the perfect pasture, right? What's his butt?
Yeah.
Keystone talks about that a lot.
Joel Salatin.
Yeah, Salatin. Yeah.
Yeah, the farm I worked with in southwestern Virginia was called Free Union Grass Farm, just like you're saying, right? The focus is just on maintaining the pasture. They were doing pastured poultry, pastured pork, pastured beef. And again, it was owned by a couple, and the woman from the couple had been an intern at Salatin's and was taking a lot of that kind of wisdom and business structure into how they were running it.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So can you put the previous picture on again?
Yeah.
Just because TJ was asking before in regards to is the manure actually a heat source, and you mentioned that the cows actually by themselves produce more heat than the manure will be because it's in the ground, so it's cooling down. But what I've seen in Europe quite a bit is that especially in old livestock farms, that actually the farmer lives above the cow barn because all the heat that the cow produces, and I don't know what the smell is like, but the heat that the cows produce will later on be used in their residence to heat at least partially their residence as well, because they're living right above it and they filter that air from the cow barn into the residence. Again, I don't know what it smelled like to live there year round, but I assume that once you do that, you don't smell it anymore.
That's right, and we saw that at the French goat farm. That was the setup. The sort of basement level was where the goats were housed overnight, and they were generating heat in there that went directly up into the living level of the home, and then the back of the home was the cheese making area, so it was all literally under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
I think they figured out the filtration pretty quickly when they started doing that, even back in the day. But I know now it's done on an industrial level. It's on some level where the heat is getting from the compost and the manures and the mixtures that they make, and then the off gassing is remedied pretty thoroughly, so to speak.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
I
add
think that, oh, go ahead.
that, sorry, this is Gentiana, but my video's off. But I was gonna add that I got to see that. I was gonna say experience, but I didn't really see that when my partner and I were on a couple farms in Basque Country in northern Spain, and that's been traditional for the Basque people for hundreds of years, where they were traditionally sheep herders and more nomadic. And then when they moved into, when they started building home structures, just like you're describing, Franca, it was all in one, where where they kept the sheep was next to or below their living quarters, and that helped heat the space, and also kept them in really close proximity with the livestock that they're caring for.
Great, thanks for adding that. Yeah, it's especially with sheep, we saw a number of places, you know, the animals are so instrumental to your survival at that level. You're using them for dairy, you're using them for meat, you're using them for you know, textile, for wool, that keeping them as close as possible is definitely in your best interest, because they're providing your sustenance.
Yeah, totally.
So next was creating that new course, livestock management. First, the plan is to offer it as an elective class under the HOR 275 special topics number, and begin with a set of modules that apply to any or all livestock production, and then get specific about poultry, sheep and goats, cattle, pigs, and let students choose term to term which ones they think are most valuable, which ones they want to work with. And we can do, you know, probably 3 of those 2-week modules in there, along with some field trips to farms that are raising these kind of animals. So it begins with talking about pasture management, exactly what TJ was saying, which is growing the grass, right? That feeds everything else, that makes your whole system work. And then the use of fencing, whether that's, you know, permanent perimeter fencing, electric fencing that's movable, you know, however intensive or non-intensive you're doing your grazing. And then looking at those specific species for how they get cared for, what kind of feed requirements they have, how you can add value to those products that they produce. You know, I gave the example of the burger business along with the beef cattle for one. And then, you know, I've been working with some of these farms through small farm school or other committees and organizations that I'm a part of in the general area. And lots of them are very excited to hear that this kind of thing is being looked at all, and seem very open to sharing their information and expertise. And I'm looking forward to including them in the future. So in addition, you know, the baseline here was livestock production skills and experience, things that I hadn't done before or didn't have a lot of experience with, was the focus. And despite being from Wisconsin, I had never worked on a dairy farm before. I'd milked a cow at the zoo or something, but so here I was milking goats on the left and milking cows on the right. Those are Fleckvieh is the breed, and they are really kind, really sweet cows. In both cases, we were using mobile vacuum systems that are pretty simple for small farms, and then filling up large stainless steel cans with milk and transferring those into a bulk tank. With a larger farm might have it where the milk would come out of these suction cups on the teat there and go directly into a tube that dumps it in the bulk tank to avoid that intermediate step. But the volume here that they were producing didn't call for that, or at least at the price that that would cost. So as I mentioned, part of if you're going to work with animals is you're going to want to keep them around. And so we did a lot of working with fences. On the right there, I'm working with Doris on restoring this perimeter fence. because a cow had broken through the fence, and the others were thinking about leaving too. And on the left, I'm working with Michael on an electric fence for the sheep and the goats. The goats like to get out, and so the charge is helpful in getting them in. But obviously, when you're working with 4,000 to 8,000 volts, you need to know what you're doing. You need to have a plan in place, an order of operations for turn this off, make adjustments, turn back on, you know, check with the voltage meter to make sure that not only are you actually providing safety by making sure the current is going through the fence, but that you're not putting yourself in danger or anyone else who's working with it as well. So I learned a lot about those, what to do and what not to do, how to use them with different animals, and the way that each species sort of thinks about movement, where their eyes are, and how they react to movement, so that you can set up the fence in a way that's less stressful and facilitates you being able to move them more easily into the next paddock or into the trailer, or you know, wherever they're going after that. So here, this was the farm in Virginia, Free Union Grass Farm, raising ducks and raising pigs, raising chickens, raising beef cattle. They had a diverse operation that was, you know, had 3 full-time employees and 2 seasonal workers, plus a additional part-time crew of 2 once a week during the poultry processing day. They did all their own on-farm poultry processing. And with that work crew, they were generating, you know, $350,000 in revenue, not net, but that's gross revenue, right? So they're doing quite well. They were an excellent example of really interesting land use agreements with their neighbors. They have a lot of neighbors with property, and in many cases, they either had an extremely cheap land lease, or they were able to show those landowners how, by actually managing animals on the land, they're increasing the quality of the grass, they're adding fertilizer, right? They're improving what it could be used for in the future. And so many of them just gave it to them for free. You know, they get the farm tax break out of it then as well. So it's certainly in the landowner's best interest. But the salesmanship of the value of the care you're giving to the land was kind of the selling point for these very cheap or free land leases. These guys did a little bit of an adjustment on the Joel Salatin system. So he's raising poultry as well, and he's doing it all in chicken tractors, which are basically a chicken wire enclosure on a wooden frame that gets moved around the field. And the chickens are always inside so that they're safe from aerial predators. In this case, they the woman Erica, who had worked at Salatin's farm, got out of there and was like, I don't want to break my back anymore pulling, you know, 100 chicken tractors every day up a hill. So they developed this system that they called Nomads. It's basically the chassis from any trailer with some corrugated metal on top and a bit of a wooden frame to tack it to. And they moved these around inside their electric net fenced paddocks, so they're protected from the outside, and they can go underneath should aerial predators be a danger. They've got a shade area during hot sun. They've got an area out of the rain or snow. You can see this was a frosty morning with the ducks. We're moving those and making sure the waters are still flowing and filling up feeds for them every morning and every afternoon. So I thought that was really an interesting way to go, and definitely seems like a more natural life for the bird than being in a, you know, a 25 or 50 square foot enclosure for its whole life, even if it does have access to pasture. The one predator that they had issues with were owls. All the other possible attack birds make noise, and so they're able to, you know, tip them off and scuttle under the Nomad. But the owls are both hunting in the dark and flying almost silently. And so, you know, every maybe once a week there was an owl that successfully killed a duck or killed a chicken. But at the level that they were at, raising batches of 500 animals, you know, that losing 10 before you get to your harvestable weight is a very low percentage, even for commercial poultry farms that are raising hundreds of thousands of animals together. On the right, same farm, working with their forest raised pork. These guys get fed a grain feed in addition to what they can eat out of the roots and junk apples they got from a neighbor, and they'll eat just about anything. But pork does require some kind of supplemental feed if you really want them to grow fast. If you want a lot of meat on there, they're not going to get enough nutrition just from roots and leaves and stuff, because they're not ruminants like the cows, like the goats, like the sheep. But they're incredibly marketable. People go crazy for the local pork. In my experience there, we were selling out of bacon day after day at the market. That's like the meat that seems to be most revered, and so people are most willing to pay a high retail dollar for a locally produced, GMO free, et cetera, good product.
Have you ever had bacon? It's obvious.
That's all it takes. Or just cooking a little bit at the market, and the smell goes out, and then they just start flocking your way. You're like, yeah, that's us right here. And while you're at it, we also have chicken, and we have beef, and we have these eggs. Same farm here on the left. They had a laying flock in addition to their broiler meat flock, and they found that the eggs, while they were marginally profitable, they were maybe netting about 10 to 15 cents per egg. So you can see $1, $1.50 a dozen maybe at the most, which isn't a huge profit there. The eggs were an incredibly important part of their business, drawing in people at the farmers markets, which were they did about 50% wholesale to restaurants and stores, and about 50% sold at farmers market. And the eggs were what brought people in. People love to see the brown egg. They love to see a fresh local egg. They chose these green cartons that stood out against all the other egg sellers at the Charlottesville farmers market. So they had their own kind of thing going, their own packaging, their own design, and they used supplemental lighting early in the season and late in the season. That's when I was there, in October and November, to continue their egg production. And so I worked at their farmers market for 5 weeks. And the first week there was maybe 3 other egg sellers. The second week there was 1 other egg seller. The last 3 weeks, they were the only egg seller, and thus all the business went to them. And they were selling, 200, 250 dozen eggs a week that way. But the difference really was that people come to get that dozen eggs, and they're like, oh yeah, and I'll pick up some bacon. Or, yep, we should get a chicken for this weekend. And so they really felt like it was that additional sale that came from having the customer base because of the eggs that made the difference for them. So finding a kind of a keystone product like that is really important, and I've got some good ideas now about how to share possibilities for that with people, as well as all the standards that go into legally and safely producing eggs and meat, which is extensive. On the right, that's just my wife feeding some cows. She loved those guys and spent a lot of time in there. And yep, industry regulations was my last point. Like I said, I worked at a slaughter and processing facility in my home state of Wisconsin. And the guy on the left in the white suit and helmet, and the woman on the left, or on the right in the white suit and helmet, are state of Wisconsin meat inspectors. So we worked alongside them as we processed poultry, beef, pork, and learned about how to palpate the animal. You're looking for any abnormalities, any swollen glands, any evidence of internal bleeding. And if you find those, obviously that animal can't then be turned around and sold. So there's a significant number of regulations that come with this that are really important to small farmers. And a big one is the ability to process. So it's a big problem because there's a limited number of processors, and they fill up very fast. They might be very far from your location. You know, around here, people are driving 2 or 3 hours sometimes to go get their poultry processed, for example. And it's tough to get a time slot. You need to be there at 6:45 a.m. with all your birds. So that means you need to catch them the night before and drive them over at 4 a.m. And so a lot of people are thinking about processing their own, which, like I said, the Free Union Grass Farm was doing. And each state has their own set of rules for this. Oregon allows you to produce, to process 1,000 birds, and they include rabbits in that rule as well, on your farm with no regulations. If you have a state inspector come out to your farm and approve that you have all stainless steel, you have a sanitizing protocol in place, you have, you know, proper tools, then you can be approved to process 20,000 birds on your property. Free Union Grass Farm was doing about 10,000 each year, so they've got room, plenty of room to grow and still not have to pay for a processor. This was the processor that is very busy, and, you know, people were trying to get into. This was also post deer hunting season, so they had venison processing going on. Very busy time to be there, and really was able to learn a lot about humane and safe slaughter. The woman who owned this business, Quality Cut Meats, was a graduate of the meat processor and handling certificate program at the University of Wisconsin, my alma mater, and so we connected over that, and that's how I got into work with her. And it was, yeah, absolutely an eye-opening experience, and and a lot of pictures also that were selected out of being included here in the presentation. Thanks for still sticking with me here. I know it's after 1 now, and I'm wrapping up. And the value-added products, I mentioned the importance of these things before. Just some examples of what we were working with. Here on the left, we were making butter for high-end restaurants in Vienna. It was a cultured, unpasteurized butter, and so besides the high-end people, there's also a really good market for very health conscious folks that are looking for that sort of a thing, and had an excellent market for butter. He was producing, you know, about 50 pounds of butter per day, and selling out very easily. In the middle here, back in England with my butcher mentor Jane, here we're making British bangers that they sold also at the stands along with the burgers, and that they sold, you know, uncooked in grocery stores. And on the right, adding rennet to a series of goat cheeses to get it to curdle before we scoop it out into the forms. So yeah, I learned a lot of those processes, the timeliness that comes with them, the food safety that comes with doing all of these things, and the ability to fit these into a larger marketing plan for your business. Value added for small farmers is a really important way to go. It can be a regulatory mess, and I'm hoping that with this experience and information, I can help people sort through that mess and make it a little bit more streamlined, because there is a lot of profit potential in the value added realm. Here she is again showing me how to butcher a lamb. These were getting cut up for individual customers who were ordering whole lambs. And she also had a great hookup with a guy in the city of Brighton, England, who operated a wholesale meat seller out business out of a camper trailer. And basically he had identified neighborhoods in Brighton, which is about a 350,000 person city, that were kind of food deserts that didn't have good access to a grocery store easily. And he set up shop there with his trailer, you know, full of freezers, running a generator, and he sold locally produced meat that way. And so they marketed all their lambs through him because they had such high demand that they were all going. So there was no need to fight in that case to sell every last bit. It was going to be an easy opportunity to make some money and not have to spend a lot of time or money in the marketing aspect because someone else was doing that for you. Just a few more value-added examples. Here we are after we press the burgers. They're all pressed by hand with that little press that's behind Jane's right hand there in the photo. First we made meatballs, then we pressed them, then we froze them, or unless for the ones that were going to the festival or event the very next day, we just put them in the fridge and made them fresh. On the right, that is my fromagerie friend Virginie, who she ran the cheese making part of the business while her husband was in charge of the goat care, hay making, and milking part of the operation. And so we got to work with both of them separately and see how they really structured their whole life around a business that made sense scale-wise, so that they didn't have to hire additional labor, that made sense in terms of work. You know, they both got up early and started work early, but they also finished at 4 o'clock with the second milking of the goats for the day, and you know, created a life. They were the ones who have that member-owned store in the town of Albertville down below their farm that made for a rich community life and also a sane work-life balance. I really thought they had it hooked up as far as how to approach being a small producer and not lose track of that it's part of your life and maybe not the whole of it. This maybe is less interesting to you guys than it was to the board. I wanted to give an example of the preparation that I've made for this livestock management course. So this is just an example of my module on poultry, talking about raising chickens for meat and for eggs, you know, talking about the different breeds, how you might select them and why, beginning to raise up chicks, what it takes to create, you know, your own brooder setup, what the costs are for these things, how to pay attention to animal health, you know, what are you feeding them, how much feed do they need, how often do they need it, etc. And then I just wanted to treat everybody to a moment of something cute. These pigs farrowed. They were born while I was working at Free Union Grass Farm. And so one day at the farm that I was feeding that mother, and the next day she was now a mother of 8. It was very exciting. And yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you very much for listening. Again, open to any questions you have. If you want to see more about a specific location, we can look at that. This is my wife, Leah. She came along with me the whole time. And we stopped paying for the web hosting, so the blog address is a mess now. It used to just be Farm Couple Abroad, but if you want to read our blog about our experiences and about reviews of each farm, not like in a Yelp review sense, but just in a informative expose on how they're doing it and why. Some of my note taking on a daily basis was in the form of the blog. You can check it out there. So I'm going to stop the share on that and stop recording.